I'll move on to Ms. Vaughn.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Sheriff. Ms. Vaughn.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. The Scott-Gardner Act addresses a very serious gap in immigration law enforcement that enables a particularly dangerous set of individuals to remain in our communities in defiance of our laws. Of course, ICE already has the authority to detain and remove illegal aliens in general and has programs in place that prioritize the removal of those who are a threat to public safety. But in practice, many illegal alien drunk drivers are falling between the cracks, sometimes with tragic consequences. This problem seems to have become worse in recent years, not because ICE personnel are incapable, but because the current administration has scaled back immigration law enforcement to affect only the most egregious offenders. In addition, they've made it harder for local law enforcement agencies to help ICE identify offenders, and they've failed to act against local governments that deliberately obstruct enforcement of the laws that Congress has passed. As we've heard, drunk driving is the most frequently committed violent crime in America. And illegal aliens who drive drunk usually come into our criminal justice system with 3 strikes: unlawful presence, drunk driving, and driving without a license. There simply is no rational argument for allowing drunk drivers who are also illegal aliens to remain here. Experts agree that drunk drivers are particularly prone to reoffend, especially if they have not faced swift and stern penalties for their first offense. I've reviewed statistics from some of the local law enforcement agencies that can track the crimes committed by the illegal aliens that they refer to ICE. And the number of illegal alien drunk driving arrests was significant in all the jurisdictions I looked at. In some areas, drunk drivers represent 1/5 to 1/2 of the criminal alien caseload. But it's the significance and mainly the stories that you hear, as well as the statistics, that suggest that some are definitely escaping justice. This bill focuses on what is key to addressing the problem, and that is the need to detain these individuals. And I want to emphasize that I don't think ICE can detain every illegal alien that is ever encountered. That's not realistic. But ICE needs a clear mandate from Congress to get this particular group of offenders off the streets so that they can be sent back to their home country. Experience and studies have shown that illegal aliens who are not detained, especially those who are facing criminal charges, often will flee from proceedings in order to avoid prosecution and removal. Statistics show that nearly 60% of illegal aliens who are not detained while in proceedings will fail to appear for their hearings or ignore orders to depart. And there are more than 700,000 absconders now at large, which is a 28% increase over 2008. Again, ICE already has the authority to detain illegal alien drunk drivers. The problem is that current policies constrict officers in the field from doing so in many cases. And yes, there's a need for more detention space, but most problematic, as this committee is aware, is that the White House has directed ICE to implement policies that exclude all but the most egregious offenders from immigration law enforcement. Under a scheme it euphemistically describes as prosecutorial discretion, but in practice is an amnesty. Now, too many illegal aliens who've been charged with crimes who once would have been detained are being released, and government attorneys are directed to file motions with the courts to have their charges dismissed. It is certain that some number of illegal alien drunk driving offenders are benefiting from these lax policies. The other reason many illegal alien drunk drivers end up back on the streets and behind the wheel is because of local sanctuary policies, where local governments actually block ICE access to non-citizen offenders. The administration has not seen fit to challenge these actions despite a variety of tools at its disposal, including lawsuits, funding, and tools like secure communities. It's important to note that sanctuary policies are often adopted for the purpose of cultivating good relations with immigrant communities, but they don't seem to have that effect in practice. I've spent years following the research on this topic, and while I understand the concerns about trust, there really is no evidence to suggest that police-ICE cooperation has any significant effect on how immigrants view police, nor any chilling effect on crime reporting, or that it results in racial or ethnic profiling. Because when people, including immigrants, see that some laws are not enforced, this doesn't increase respect for local authorities, it only makes the community more vulnerable to criminals. This bill's provision to allow local officers to issue detainers and transport drunk drivers to federal custody definitely will help many law enforcement agencies, but there is definitely a need for more training in places. And in addition, ICE should expand the cost-effective 287G program, which is a force multiplier and adds local resources to the mix. And finally, it is about time for ICE to establish a victims advocacy unit to help give a voice to the people who are affected by crimes committed by illegal aliens, because currently they don't have a voice.
Thank you, gentlelady. Ms. Vaughn, in FY 2011, ICE claimed it removed 35,927 illegal immigrants who had been convicted of drunk driving. If this is the case, why would we need the bill? And do you believe this number is accurate?
Well, I can't. I assume that it is accurate. ICE, has put that statistic out there, and that sounds like a lot. It's about 9% of the removals for last year. But what I noticed when I went through the statistics that I was able to obtain from the law enforcement agencies that are able to track the crimes of the illegal aliens that they refer to ICE, that they were reporting higher percentages of their illegal alien caseload that were drunk drivers. So I started to wonder, why would there be that discrepancy? And there could be a lot of reasons for it, but based on those statistics and based on what I was hearing from some of these agencies and their experiences, there seemed to be a lot of people falling between the cracks. And this often has to do with the message that ICE agents in the field seem to have gotten, that they're to wait for a conviction before they are able to act on immigration violations. And the problem is that so many of these drunk driving offenders never get to the conviction stage because they abscond before that, just as the case with Mr. Chavez in Chicago. So there's a noticeable discrepancy between what local agencies are seeing and what ICE is actually doing.
Thank you, Ms. Vaughn. Mr. Conyers? Mr. Conyers?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I feel like I should go back to my 10th Amendment routine here. Matter of fact, I think I'll just read it one more time, so that you constitutional authorities will be able to reason with me. Powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. And this means that the federal system cannot assign federal responsibilities to local law enforcement. And here's where we get into some problems, Sheriff. In 3808, we say that if a state or local law enforcement officer apprehends an individual for an offense described in the subsection, and the officer has reasonable ground to believe that the individual is an alien. That's a federal responsibility. That's why when you were telling our colleague about what happens after they've been booked, we're talking about what happens that caused them to get booked. And in this instance, it's that somebody had reasonable ground to believe the individual is an alien. And that raises a whole host of problems. And so all I'm pointing out to you is that we have a constitutional infirmity that I don't think is correctable. Does anybody else want to share their view on this? Did I presume you all agree with me? Always. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
In my experience from doing training of law enforcement officials and interacting with them, I don't, and I would leave it to the two law enforcement officers here at this table to correct me if I'm wrong, but I have never gotten the sense that local law enforcement agencies see this bright line between state and federal responsibilities. Most local law enforcement agencies that I've encountered feel it is their duty and responsibility to work closely with federal law enforcement agencies in getting the job done on behalf of public safety. And they're more than willing to do that and don't see it as a burden because they see the benefits of that for their community.
I'd like to note also, Ms. Vaughn, I assume that you favor the immigration enforcement priorities, that we should set priorities, and that one of those priorities ought to be drunk driving. Is that correct?
Well, that should be up to ICE.
Okay. I'd like to ask unanimous consent, Mr. Chairman, to include in the record the guidance from ICE. And it says the following are enforcement priorities for the Department of Homeland Security, and it includes, obviously, terrorism and national security, but also driving under the influence of alcohol or drugs as a priority for enforcement for the Department of Homeland Security. And I would note also, as I think has been discussed, that the single greatest, most serious charge for those in ICE custody is driving under the influence of liquor. That is the most common reason for somebody being held in ICE custody.
And I would wonder if anybody would be volunteer to having looked at any of that kind of data and try to come to some kind of a conclusion as to what we might have to reallocate for resources so that we could enforce the law 100% all of the time. So there are law enforcement officers, when they encounter somebody that's unlawfully present in the United States, can turn them over to ICE, and ICE can be there reliably to pick them up and put them back in the condition that they were in before they committed the crime, or punish them appropriately and then do so. Has anyone looked at it from that perspective? Ms. Vaughn?
Not specifically using that methodology, but I think there is also an assumption that some people make that, you know, and I've heard it said a lot, well, if we are forced to enforce immigration laws against these so-called minor criminals, well, then we can't deal with the ones that everyone considers to be the more serious criminals. And that's really a false choice that's set up, because ICE and its ability to set priorities also has a range of different options available to it for how it deals with people. And what we've been noticing in our research is that the choices they are making and how they process people are actually stifling their ability to increase the number of removals and deal with all of the people that they encounter. So it's not, you know, there's no finite number. There's no limit on the number of people that they can necessarily remove in a year, like it's set at 400,000 and we can't do any more unless we have more money. There are ways to do more with the same amount of money that they're not choosing to do.